Hello, everybody. Welcome back to English Champion. On this episode, we are talking about a problem at not only the university level, but probably all levels of academia, and that is reading. Not only students doing the reading, actually doing the assignments, but some of their skills in reading. Are they even able to do the assignments that teachers are giving them? So this is an article that appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education about a week ago, and I thought it was very interesting, and it actually goes beyond just the topic of reading to some of the broader sort of systemic problems going on at the university level now as well. So I'm going to tie some specific English things here regarding reading to some of the broader problems going on at the university level, and kind of walk through this article because there are some things in here that are pretty decent, some good ideas, and then there's some other ideas in here that they're just not accurate, and they need to be explained a little bit better. And so I'm gonna help you through that. So this was an article called "Is This the End of Reading?" So I'll share some of it with you. Teresa McPhail's a pragmatist. In her 15 years of teaching, as the number of students who complete their reading assignments has steadily declined, she has adapted. She began assigning fewer readings, then fewer still. Less is more, she reasoned. She would focus on the readings that mattered most and were interesting to them. So just right out of the gate, there is some validity to this that, even though you're a professor in a certain content area and you maybe have, this large library of resources in your brain that you think everyone has to read because maybe you did, that isn't always the case. There's a lot of stuff we can skip, actually. So assigning fewer readings might be a good idea. It depends on what you select, though. So, not everything that could be assigned reading is always as valuable as you think, actually. And so trimming some of that out might be a decent idea. However, a good teacher can usually make something that might be a bit dry. You can get students excited about it. So part of it might be the reading problem, but also part of it could be a teaching problem that we need to do a better job of explaining and inspiring students to want to read those materials, even if they are long or difficult. Instead of just cutting them, maybe we could get them to read if we just did it better. For a while, that seemed to work, she said. But then things started to take a turn for the worse. Most students were still doing the reading. Most students still weren't doing the reading. And when they were, more and more struggled to understand it. Some simply gave up. Their distraction levels went through the roof, she said. They had trouble following her instructions, and sometimes students said her expectations, such as writing a lengthy research paper with many sources, her expectations were unreasonable. So this is all true. The not reading, the not understanding, not being able to follow directions, not being able to tackle things that are a little more challenging, it's all true. Everything that this is describing is actually accurate at the university level. Lots of problems going on here. So this lady is an associate professor in a science department. Skimming ahead a little bit. If you design a class based on the assumption that students will do the readings, you'll get nowhere. If you make it easier and go over what they should have read in class, students will participate. But then, what are you doing other than entertaining? So yeah, this is a big problem because not everything can be discussed during a class period. And sometimes we need to hear from original authors. So you can't just confine learning to your own class period. There's just not enough hours in the week. If you really want them to learn and extend their knowledge and extend their experience of, in this case, college, most of that happens outside the class, and you're just not going to get to all of it in your 2 to 3 hours that you are with your students in the class. So there has to be stuff going on outside, and just making it easier isn't going to help these students get any smarter. And also, as she said, just because you trim things down doesn't mean the students are still going to do it. It's not like they're appreciative that you had assigned 200 pages of reading and you trimmed it down to 100, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. No, they go, well, you assigned 100 pages. Why don't you trim it further? So yeah, it doesn't matter what you do for them. They're not going to do it. That's what's happening today. And so if you keep dropping the standards, they're going to sink to those levels. So this is where, as the article will continue on, you have to just make a choice. Are you going to hold a standard and say, no, this is important, we're going to do this, and I expect you to do it because we're adults and this is what university learning is like. Or you could go, well, I'll cut it back, I'll help you out. And then the students just drift further down to wherever the lowest level of standards will be in your class or at the university. And then that's where we are today, where people aren't smart enough and they aren't prepared enough. So this glimpse into reading is a peek into everything that's going wrong at the university level. She has followed the mantra for a long time of meet your students where they are. But if she meets them any further down, she says she'll feel like a cruise director organizing games of shuffleboard. So this is true. We can't go any lower. We already teach college classes at the level of high school at best, maybe even lower. We've really made things way too easy. And that idea of meet your students where they are, that's sort of true at the K through 12 level, because after all, you, especially if you're a public school teacher, have no control over who your students are. Everyone has to come to school, so you kind of have to just deal with what you get. That is not the case at the university, and that's the problem. If you are at a university where someone is saying, an administrator probably saying, well, we need to meet our students where they are, you are at a low functioning, low standards university. So sorry to break it to you, but that's what's happening. If that's a real mantra that's being discussed, that you just need to meet your students where they are, you're admitting that your students are low, which begs the question, why did you let them into your school in the first place? And then now you have to reduce all your standards across the board because you have those students in your class, and otherwise they're going to fail. Now, I have no problem failing students. But if these schools do, then you're going to have an entire school full of low performing students, and you're not teaching college anymore. Like she says, you're teaching shuffleboard. That's the real problem. Academics across the country are talking about the reading problems they are seeing among traditional age students. Many, they say, don't see the point in doing much work outside of class. Some struggle with reading endurance and weak vocabulary. A lack of faith in their own academic abilities leads some students to freeze and avoid doing the work altogether. And a significant number of those who do the work seem unable to analyze complex or lengthy texts. Their limited experience with reading also means they don't have the context to understand certain arguments or point of view. Again, that's all true. I'm going to do a video here shortly about a lecture I give in my classes about how vocabulary and base level knowledge informs everything we do. And so that's what's happening is you can't give students complicated, lengthy, original sources because they don't even know what to connect it to. They don't have the underlying knowledge or vocabulary to then go to an advanced level. So they're way behind in all levels of reading and language usage. And so when you're trying to get your freshmen to read something, you have to automatically assume these kids are probably reading at about a ninth grade level. And if you want to get your juniors and seniors to do something in college, you probably have to assume they're reading at about a junior or senior high school level. They just don't know enough. They don't know the vocabulary. They have no knowledge of the real world. They can't connect the dots between different areas. It's really bad. And so the reading is where that shows up because, they don't even know what they're looking at. So, this is a huge problem. And I'm going to make a video of a lecture I give here in the coming days. These struggles are not limited to a particular type of student or college. This is a cohort, after all, that has had smartphones in their pockets since middle school, survived pandemic high school, and faces a future that appears to many of them fractured and hopeless. This one professor teaches cinema and media studies at Wellesley College, where the average student scored above 1,400 on the SAT. However, even at this school, the baseline for what students consider a reasonable amount of work has dropped noticeably, and he has reduced course readings accordingly. They also struggle to write at length, and in a world of truncated communication, a 750-word essay feels long. Again, all true. The reading problems and writing problems are connected. I constantly tell everyone this. It's just a hard truth that there's no getting around it. I hear people make excuses for it and say, no, I know someone who does. Nope. Here's the reality. If you are not a good reader, you cannot be a good writer. It's just that simple. And the inverse is true too. If you can't write, you're probably not going to be a very good reader. They go together. I've never had, in all my years of being a professor, 17 years at the college level, and then several years before that at lower levels, I've never had a student who was an excellent reader, but was an awful writer. And I've never had a student who was an excellent writer, but was a terrible reader. Never. In the thousands of students I've taught, that's never happened. And again, I'm going to hear someone complain, no, I know someone who, or I'm like this, I can write, but I struggle with, nope, it's not true. Those two things go together. If you're good at one, really good, you'll probably be good at the other one. It's just how it is. And if you're bad at one, you're going to be bad at the other one too. It's all connected. The challenge is not limited to courses in the humanities and social sciences either. There's this other lady who's a professor of biology. She says 18 years ago, new students were able to synthesize and summarize information from multiple lectures on a topic to extract general principles they could apply in new situations. Not anymore, she says. We spend a lot of time learning in class and doing recitation, during recitation, how to identify categories of information in the text, how to organize them in a table, and how to shift perspective such that we can observe a pattern. Yeah, this is all comprehension. Summarizing, being able to interpret, compare, all of those higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Again, if students can't handle the basic level of acquiring the information and comprehending it, they're not going to be able to use it at the higher levels of that taxonomy. And so, yeah, this is what we're seeing is you can't anymore just give students a set of information and say, okay, interpret this or summarize it and create a report about it. You have to walk them through every single thing. And it's a reading problem, which then again becomes a writing problem. That difficulty in processing information seeps into other functions as well, she says. Note-taking now requires specific instruction on what to write down and how to organize it. Also, a lot of students are unable to rephrase a statement without changing the meaning, often in drastic ways that clearly contradict the core of the statement. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I can't believe after all these years, it's always been pretty bad, but it's gotten so much worse that students don't have any idea how to take notes. Whether you're lecturing or you're using a reading as your sort of source material for the day, students don't have any clue on how to find the most important ideas. Either they try to jot down everything, or if it's a reading, they'll highlight everything, which means if everything's important, then nothing's important, right? So they can't discern the really valuable from sort of just the connective tissue of whatever it is you're talking about or reading about. So yeah, you actually have to teach adults how to take notes now. That's what's happening. And again, yeah, if they can't summarize, that means they don't comprehend. I constantly tell my students, summarizing is indicative of your intelligence. It's indicative of your knowledge acquisition. If all you can do is regurgitate word for word back what you've heard or read, you didn't understand it. You just remembered it and spat it back out. Being able to summarize is a true indicator of intelligence, that you have taken something in, you've processed it and understood it in a way so that you can reconstitute it in your own language and then communicate it back. Students really struggle with that, so I spend a lot of time in my classes working on summarizing and how important that is. So yeah, all these things are true. This other professor sees a deeper irony here. If college level skills are declining, he asks, of what use have all the pedagogical consultants and all the emphasis on teaching to the test? What have they been in public schools? That's a great question, because we keep spending millions and millions and billions of dollars on programs in K through 12 and then also at the college level to improve teaching and give kids resources and all these extra learning opportunities, and they're worse than ever. So what was all that for? Yeah, it's a great question. Where did all that money go? In short, professors say students are coming into college with a host of new and alarming challenges, including fragmented and distracted thinking, along with sharper limits on what they are willing or able to do. What do you do when students don't or can't do the work? It's very easy. You do not let them into your school. And if they somehow are able to get in, you flunk them. If they can't do the standard, you close the door. You say, you're sorry, you can't handle this. It's not you. I'm sure you're a very nice person, but you need to go do something else because this is not for you. You can't handle this. You've shown that you are not capable of performing at this level that is the minimum to be at this school, or, to pursue into a certain major, or whatever the levels are. If you can't do it, you can't come in. It's just like everything else. In the Marines, if you can't do these physical requirements, you can't be a Marine. If you're joining a sports team and you want to be a good high-level basketball player and you don't know how to dribble, you can't be on that team. If you want to be a football player and you don't know how to catch a ball, or a baseball player, you can't be on the team. I'm sorry. Again, it's not that you're a bad person, but you should not be here. Go do something else. And until teachers in their individual classrooms and universities in their broad enrollment policies, until they do that, where they say, I'm sorry, you are not cut out to be here. Good luck in something else. This is going to keep becoming a much worse problem. And this is why nobody trusts universities anymore, because most of the people in the university should not be there. That's just the way it is. So there's a section here where, some of this has been going on for a long time. Professors have always complained about students not doing all the reading. So this isn't exactly a new phenomenon. It's just way worse than ever before. It references an article from Slate magazine published a couple months ago, where this guy, Adam Kotsko, argued that the literacy crisis he has seen among his students is different. It's always been kind of bad, or it's been getting worse, and now it's something different altogether. He describes it as a conspiracy without conspirators. No one deliberately set out to design a system in which students were not taught the skills they need to become effective readers, critical thinkers, and cogent writers, he believes, but that is the result. Maybe not previously, but AI is definitely intended to do that. Look at all the proponents at all these universities or high schools that are saying we have to embrace the technology. This AI is such a great tool to help everyone become a better writer. And as I've said on other podcasts, nope, it's intended to replace you. So it's not going to help you. It's just going to do it for you. And so when it says there's a conspiracy without conspirators, well, the conspirators now are anyone pushing AI. If we're talking about language and reading and writing, and your ability to, do critical thinking and be like you said, a cogent writer. Yeah, the technology that is coming out, it's done on purpose. And so if people around you are embracing that, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get people who can't read, can't write, can't think, and we therefore have a less intelligent population. That guy, Kotsko, was an assistant professor in a Great Books program. He began noticing student behaviors change around 2019. Even students who clearly did the work and wanted to do the work were responding to the reading in a way that was odd and ungrounded in what was said, as though they had grabbed onto a couple of points in isolation. This guy might be getting fooled by his students. It's possible that the students were just looking for shortcuts. So even if he thought they were good students, they were probably fooling him and sliding by, kind of taking the Spark Notes method of education, where they just grab a couple key ideas, say them in class, sound smart, and pass the test, or, write a paper in such a way that it is good enough to pass. So it's possible that these students who he thinks were actually good students actually weren't good students. They were just better at fooling you than everyone else in your class. So what accounts for these changes? Well, there's a couple options, they say. A decline in academic expectations during and after the pandemic has led to learning loss, recent assessments show. A 2023 survey found that 24% of secondary school officials described the loss of learning in English and language arts as severe or very severe, and 15% said the same about social studies. All right, I might talk about this at length later on, but here's the reality. The COVID stuff, this is not to blame on COVID. All of this was happening long before this, okay? I saw students being, worse readers long before 2020 ever came along. We have to stop blaming the pandemic for all of this stuff with education, because that's become kind of the get out of jail free card for a lot of these professors and universities, where they go, well, the students aren't doing well, but we all had to deal with the pandemic, and so we're trying to get back on our feet. No, the pandemic made it worse for certain. And again, as I've said on other podcasts, yeah, some of us tried to warn you, and we got demonized for it. We tried to say this is going to be bad for students, And you said, oh, you guys are terrible for wanting to make kids still go to school and have high standards and still take SATs and ACTs and actually have to be competent. You're a big meanie and you don't believe in safety. Well, this is what you get. Everyone realizes now that that was horrible. But again, things were happening long before that as well. So we need to stop this discussion of, 2020 was really the cause for all these problems we're seeing. No, we've had bad students for a long time now. Additionally, a generation of students may have been harmed by problematic reading instruction strategies used in many elementary schools. Rather than learning the building blocks of words through phonics, they were taught to rely on context clues, an approach not backed by research. Yeah, this is very true. When I first became a teacher 23 years ago, my school taught this. And so, this is real. We are seeing the fruits of all that bad instruction today. I fought it in my own classroom. I was like, I don't think this is correct. And I taught my students a different way. But our school policy was to teach this different style of reading, and it wrecked an entire generation of students. Testing culture also discourages deep reading, critics say, because it emphasizes close reading of excerpts, for example, to study a particular literary technique rather than reading entire works. That's true, but it's not just the testing culture. We have made education so utilitarian that, in this case, reading has been purely for function. It's let me find what I need to find so that I can accomplish what I need to accomplish and I can go get the job I want to get. Instead of focusing on reading as a much larger process that takes a lot of practice and good skills cognitively. Yeah, testing culture kind of does that, but we've been doing it just with our emphasis in the classroom long before the testing culture came around. Young people are also reading less for pleasure. A lot of data on that. Read Mark Bauerlein's 2 books about young people not reading and the consequences of that. Both of his Dumbest Generation books you should definitely read. They're fantastic. The ubiquity of smartphones and social media have also affected literacy across the board. Children and adults alike are reading in fundamentally different ways. For one, phones have been shown to no one's surprise to interfere with our ability to focus, and apps such as TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram have shifted our reading habits towards short and often fragmentary text. Yep, that's all true. In my class, I actually teach Nicholas Carr, his book The Shallows, and many of his articles that he writes about technology and how it affects your brain and how you learn. They've made everyone's brain worse. So again, all you people who push technology in your classrooms, this is what you get because your students can't read. So there you have it. How much each of these influences has shaped today's students, though, is up for debate. Is reading comprehension declining because of the way reading is taught? Partly, yep. Is it because students are learning less about history and science and thus lack context for what they do read? Again, partly, yes. And is social media use necessarily bad if students are creating and consuming new forms of communication that emphasize visual and auditory literacy? Yes, that's still bad. So yes, all of them. Meanwhile, not many young people or parents surveyed in 2023 expressed deep concern about college readiness or academic well-being, which suggests students may be coming into college assuming they have been well prepared for college-level work. Part of that misunderstanding may be due to changes to grading during the pandemic that made it appear students had learned effectively despite a growing gap between high school grades and standardized test scores. Again, this all happened before COVID. All right. Yes, this is all true. That students now, it's amazing how many students I've had over the years who, I give them a D on a paper and they're absolutely stunned. They're like, but I got A's in all of my high school English classes. And I have to tell them, yeah, your high school English teachers didn't grade you properly. I'm sorry. You were taught poorly. You're in the right room now. I'm going to teach you how to do it right. But, they need a wake-up call to the fact that, you aren't good at this. I'm going to need to work with you and we need to practice. They assume they know stuff and they don't. Because high school is so easy now that everyone gets good grades. And so they think, I'm ready for college. And they're not even close. I have a lot of students who think they've already mastered the art of writing and other students who've never been required to really try, says the Wellesley professor, who attributes students' declining literacy skills to minimal writing requirements in high school and receiving good grades for mediocre work. I had I specifically remember an instance with a student a couple years ago. I'm sure I've had more, but I was it stuck in my brain because I was so shocked by it. Where he was making a bunch of mistakes, and I kind of said, "Look, man, didn't you do this in high school? I mean, I'm not. This was just a basic freshman class, so I wasn't introducing anything super challenging yet." And I was like, "You should have already kind of done this in high school, right? We're just kind of brushing up on it and trying to take some small steps towards improvement." And he had no idea what we were doing. And so I asked, "Yeah, didn't you write papers?" And he said, "No, we mostly just made PowerPoints and videos." And I thought, "Oh my gosh." So the high schools have abandoned writing, and they think, again, well, writing can be a variety of things. Yeah, it can, but unless they can do this stuff, the basic writing first, you can't move on to the other stuff. And so these kids are being taught that, well, just make a PowerPoint and give us a presentation. That'll count in your English class. And that is not good. And then when you throw in the communication cultures that they already exist in, at least to me, a picture starts to emerge which shows a pretty clear and consistent message that our culture implicitly makes. The kind of writing I might ask of my students isn't that important. Yeah, I mean, they're going to think that. And maybe they have a right to. Maybe if your class and your school don't emphasize these things and make it clear why it's important, then that's the only, deduction they can reach. So make it important. This lady who is a vice provost at a university has seen these trends play out on her campus. A number of entering students who did not meet at least one of the measures in the standards for readiness, which evaluates reading, writing, and math, hit 25% this past year. In 2019, that was only 10%. So just in the last 4 years, it's more than doubled. And the number of students who have to take remedial classes is alarming, which again begs the question, why are they in college? If the whole point of high school was that you had proven that you had acquired these skills that prepared you for college skills, to learn college skills, and we get to college and we find out, oh, you can't do them, that means your high school education wasn't good enough and you probably shouldn't be here because you can't handle the work, at least the work at the standards that college is supposed to be at. Now, we've dropped the standards so far that we kind of go, well, even though you clearly aren't ready for college, you'll probably be fine. And yeah, some of them are, but it reduces the entire environment on that campus. Professors tell her that students are doing less academic work outside of class, of course. She attributes that to their hectic lives in which, on any given day, school may not be their first priority. So this gets talked about a lot, and it's all nonsense, okay? I know some students, there's a select few for whom they have no time during the day to do their other stuff because they're taking care of sick parents, they have to work a full-time job, maybe they live off campus and they have to commute an hour, some crazy schedule they're on. Certainly there are students like that. Those students are very, very few. The data all points. Look it up. All the data shows that young people today have more free time than any previous generation. More free time. And again, read Academically Adrift, read any book about academia today, and how students are performing. And it will say, yeah, students have tons of free time. They just don't study, or they don't read, or they don't practice their skills. What do? They goof around online. They watch YouTube and look at Instagram, or they play video games. So you can't say, oh, they have such hectic lives. No, they don't. They just don't. Stop spreading that idea, because for the vast majority of students, they have plenty of free time that they could be using to work on their skills and acquire more knowledge, and they don't. And then they go to college, and somehow they still get good grades. How does that even happen when students aren't even studying? They can't read, they can't write, and yet the most common grade on college campuses today is an A. How is that happening? Because universities have lowered all their standards. So everything's connected. The students aren't doing their job. The professors and the universities aren't doing their job. And so we just have this revolving door of people going through the system and no one's doing their job. And now university quality has plummeted. These students want a very specific roadmap, she says. They don't necessarily want to have to go to class face to face. They want to know exactly what they need to do to be successful in the course, but they want to put in the minimum amount of time to sort of check the box. I did this assignment. I did the thing I have to do, and that's it. I've given all I have to give. This is completely true. I learned this recently. Again, I've been doing this for many, many years, but I was doing some online stuff recently, had to cover some courses, and it had been a while since I had taught some classes online. And I immediately started noticing that online students, this is especially true for them, they view online, I'm going to do a whole thing on online learning and technology stuff at some point, because what we think students do with technology is not what they actually do. You think a student in an online class is going to spend time at his computer and do research and do all his work and talk to his classmates through the discussion boards and have these nice email exchanges with professors. No. Online students do exactly what in-person students do. They don't do anything extra. They don't do the readings, and they view everything as a checklist. And so online, all they do is, what's my task? I did the minimum. I submitted it. Give me full credit, please, because I did the task. And they go through their whole curriculum like that. So this is exactly true. They just want to be told, what do I have to do to get a good grade in this class? Give me a checklist and I'll just do that. It's not about learning. So this whole model of online education is a disaster. I'm going to, again, do a longer piece on this. It's an absolute disaster because there's nothing about it that is about learning or excellence. It's all about checking boxes, going through the tasks, submitting them, and going, give me my A, please. I did what you told me. And that's all it is. Students' declining willingness to put in time in their coursework may be related to the way homework has been treated in some middle and high schools, some professors think. In recent years, and especially during the pandemic, some school districts adopted what's known as equitable grading practices. I talked about this a little bit before, and here's what that means. As part of that movement, some set minimum grades at 50% instead of 0 and removed penalties for late work, among other shifts. The idea was to provide a safety net for struggling students who would benefit from additional chances to succeed. It's much harder to rebuild your GPA from 0, after all, than from 50. But critics argue that such an approach can backfire because if done poorly, it conveys to students that deadlines, homework, and effort don't matter. Of course. Earlier this year, a conservative policy group laid out a critique like that, arguing that the practices lower academic standards and are likely to do long-term damage to the educational equity their advocates purport to advance. So I talked about this in my DEI video, if you want to go back and watch that one, where this is what's at the root of all of this, lowering all the standards, and even not just with grading, but to the point of, do you even have to do the homework? And if you don't do it at all, you still get a 50%. Well, if you didn't do any of it, why wouldn't you get a 0? 0 means you didn't do anything. So how are you getting half credit when you did 0 credit? It doesn't make any sense. Deadlines, you don't have to do things on time. This is all true, and it's craziness. And students have adapted to it because now they just go, oh, I guess all the years that you told me deadlines matter, they don't, because you just made a new policy that they don't matter. So I guess I'll just do it whenever I feel like it, or I won't, and you'll just give me half credit anyway. And then all I have to do is improve just slightly on the next assignment, and I'll be passing your class. I've had administrators say out loud that doing these kinds of things encourages learning, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Nope, it just reinforces to students that they don't have to do anything. This is a student now. She's a freshman. She says she felt the effects of lowered expectations in her own high school during the pandemic. I used to be in middle school, at least, the kid that would always get stuff in on time and cared a lot about my classes. She was in 9th grade when COVID hit. The pandemic changed the way I worked. It definitely stunted me a little bit. Yep, of course. A marine biology class she took in high school consisted of worksheets. A geometry teacher would let students use a tutoring platform during tests to figure out answers. I take responsibility for this, she says. I can't say it's the teacher's fault for not pushing me hard enough. But when people would just let us do anything, I didn't feel motivated to do extra work for classes I wasn't passionate about. Yeah, the students will just drop to whatever the minimum that you allow. And then we all go, gosh, I don't know why students aren't doing very well in our classes anymore. Because you've made it way too easy. Make it harder, challenge them, and force them to rise up to that level. And if they don't, give them the boot, because they shouldn't be there. They can't handle it, and they should go do something else. But you can't be surprised at this. This is all so normal. Another student who's a sophomore in college also found his motivation dropped when classes went online. Online, the worst. During his sophomore and junior years of high school, I'd lay in bed and watch Netflix movies, probably go on YouTube a little bit, and then the work I did, I cheated on all of it. He's still struggling with the aftermath, finding it harder to talk to his classmates, feel connected to his college, and find meaning in his courses. It's more like I have to do it, he says, than I want to do it. I completely appreciate this kid's honesty, but if you think this kid is an anomaly, no, this is almost all students are like this. Yeah, they sit around, they lay in bed, they watch Netflix and YouTube and play around on Instagram, and they have no connection to anything. They don't care because they don't need to care. You haven't made them care about it. Back to a professor now of English. Used to teach middle and high school. When he began his last stint as a high school teacher, he recalls being told that he had to give students 50% on homework, even if they had not submitted it. He couldn't give anyone lower than a C on an assignment. He too has been troubled by such changes. He says, I have a lot more students who come into college who got an A in their senior English class and expect to get an A here as well. But they realized pretty quickly that the A they earned in high school was not even a C in college. That's exactly right. That's almost my entire college experience as a professor. However, he doesn't think those changes alone account for students' weak reading and writing skills. More concerning, he says, is that parents don't seem to be reading as much to their children or modeling good reading habits themselves. According to Gallup, Americans are reading fewer books on average than they did in the past, with college graduates showing the steepest decline. So yeah, people are just doing other things. They're not interested in reading. And again, there's this domino effect that everything down the line relies on you being a good reader. And so if you're not reading and getting practice and training yourself to be a good thinker and being good at analytical exercises and remembering things and all that, if you don't get that practice early on, you're going to be terrible at it later. And this is what It's what we see happening. So yeah, it's partly parents' fault. It's the students themselves. It's teachers. Everyone's to blame because we haven't made them do it. It's like eating vegetables. If the kids don't like it, you have to figure out a way to make them do it. There has to be consequences, and there have been no consequences. Because after all, you don't do your work in high school, who cares? You still get into college. There's no requirements to get into college anymore. Everyone gets in. And then in college, there are many teachers who don't really grade that hard, so now you get your diploma. So you've made it through all of your education without having to actually be skilled. And then all the employers on the other end go, wait a minute, I can't hire you. You're not nearly qualified enough for this job. And then the kids are like, but what do you mean? I just spent all that time in school. How am I not qualified? Yeah, because they didn't do any work while they were in school. That's why. Some professors say their own colleagues have fueled students' antipathy towards reading. They criticize instructors who tell students that everything they need to know will be on the PowerPoint slides. Yeah, this is not good teaching, or who assign readings for no apparent reason. They're never mentioned in class, and students are never tested on this material, and the readings tend to be really dull. These are just bad teachers. This isn't a reading problem. This is a teaching problem. And there's a lot of PhD level people who don't know how to teach properly. Textbooks are really boring, this one professor says, and that's partly true. That's why I've moved away from textbooks in a lot of my classes, and I use trade books, and I teach skills through content on topics that I think the students will find really interesting. So I kind of kill two birds with one stone. I get them excited about the content, which gets them excited about reading. And then I kind of sneak in the writing portion of it too. And then they also are more interested in writing because we did the first two things. So there is a way around the textbook problem, and I figured it out. So I hope other people do as well. This one lady says, we have narrowed the definition of reading to a certain kind of material. She says, namely textbooks and academic articles. And then we've drawn the conclusion that they can't read or won't read. This lady says that she has started to embrace new forms of communication in her courses, turning to video or podcasts when it seems appropriate. While she is as critical as many of her peers are of the way reading is taught in schools, encouraging students to mine texts to perform well on standardized tests, she also thinks educators should consider presenting information through other forms of media when planning their courses. If over and over and over again there's a problem with what you're asking students to do, then consider doing something else. That's a slippery slope, because you shouldn't constantly be chasing the easiest way to get your students to do anything. Maybe the difficult thing is the best way for the students, or the best way to learn that material. You making it easier and trying to be hip and cool by going, we're going to watch a video instead, or we're going to listen to a podcast. Now, if those things are valuable, then great. But if you're doing it solely because you're like, well, my kids don't read, so I got to come up with something else, that's a really bad option. And again, it's a slippery slope, because how you've already started giving up reading. At what point will you give it up completely? And then when a student has to read at some point, aren't we going to go, gosh, wonder why my kids can't read very well? Yeah, it's good. Again, you didn't make them. You let them listen to podcasts instead of reading. Podcasts are good, but it's not reading. Those are two different things. Students who talked to the Chronicle agreed that while distraction and disengagement is a constant challenge, college doesn't necessarily help. The student from before, who's majoring in sociology and plays on his college baseball team, says his classes aren't very interesting and don't hold his attention. So he's a major in sociology. If you think that's boring, maybe you shouldn't be in sociology. I tell my students that all the time. Anytime you think something's boring, you're probably in the wrong class. You need to go find something you like. Or you're a boring person. You don't know enough. Once you knew more stuff, you'll find more things interesting. So, it might be the teacher and the class fault, but it might be your fault as the student. It's like being a baseball player and going, gosh, baseball's kind of boring. Well, why are you playing baseball? Right? You wouldn't say that about your sport. So, I had students who major in all sorts of things, and they get frustrated about the reading, or they didn't really like a certain activity or a certain class or a certain teacher. It's like, maybe you don't like that material. Maybe you don't like that subject area. You need to think more about that. Another professor raises an issue that many professors have noticed getting worse over the past 2 or 3 years. Students increasingly feel overwhelmed. Then it's a fight or flight scenario, she says, where a lot of them just stop doing the work. They're thinking, I failed, and they're just not turning in anything. That's really starting to concern me. They're not adaptive to stress anymore. That's true. A student will get a bad grade on a project in my classes, and they just disappear. They don't even try to improve. And a lot of them, they don't even drop before the drop time. And so they end up wasting all that money. It's crazy. There's not a lot of kind of diligence and discipline to stick with something, even though it's challenging. These students are like, oh, I didn't like it. It was too hard. I quit. And you never see them again. There's a section here on personality traits and how, especially since 2020, people have become a lot more neurotic. They're constantly stressed out and they're worried about things. And again, this was probably long before 2020. According to Penn State Center for Collegiate Mental Health, which tracks students who seek counseling on their campuses, rates of generalized anxiety and social anxiety have moved steadily upward since 2010. So while the pandemic certainly exacerbated students' anxiety, those trend lines were climbing before it hit. Yep, that's why I said it's not the pandemic. It's more likely it's smartphones and social media. That's the real problem. Pandemic wasn't the problem. It made everything worse, but all this was going on long before that. Another guy says, social media is probably part of it. Young people are spending a lot more time alone, again, which harms their education. And again, here we are pushing students into online classes where what are they going to do? Be alone on social media. And then we go, gosh, I wonder why they have so much anxiety, because they're spending all their time alone and they're just interacting with a screen and not talking to people. Yep. And we're pushing them to it. Online education is an absolute farce. All right. It's a sham. I'll talk about that later. Some stuff about Gen Z. As for why they may not be showing up for class or doing the work, it's part social anxiety, part cynicism. I think they see school very transactionally. Schools also see students more transactionally than they did in the past. It's not the deep relationship educators want it to be. Yeah, that's totally true. And again, online education makes all of that way worse. It's even more of a transaction. The student goes, I'm going to click. I'm now in your class. I'm going to do the checklist. Give me my grade, please. And the teacher on the other end goes, click, you're in the class. I'll grade your checklist. I'll hand you your grade. It's all a transaction. It's not a relationship. And everyone's becoming worse because of it. Yeah, more stuff about the pandemic. Again, it's not that. For many professors, teaching seems to be an inflection point, but which direction it's headed is anyone's guess. Will college become even more like high school? Oh, it became high school many years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's been high school for a while now. Will textbooks be replaced by podcasts? Yeah, again, that's a really bad idea. Like I said, I'm going to do a presentation about why reading is so valuable for knowledge and memory and comprehension. You're not going to be able to get that through listening or watching videos. Will students' thinking, writing, and reading become even more fragmented, requiring further changes in the classroom? I assume so. We all kind of feel lost these days, myself included, says the lady who started this article. Administrators don't seem to be aware of the magnitude of the problem, she says, nor are parents or the general public. I keep coming back to, there's something broken in American culture. We pay lip service to education, but we're not giving people who educate any resources or power to discipline. This is exactly right. Those other people, they're not in the classrooms, so they don't know what's going on. Administrators don't have any clue what real teaching is like. They don't know what's going on. Parents don't really know. They kind of think, well, as long as I'm paying the bill, and as long as my kid gets an A or a B and they get that diploma, it's probably fine. They don't know the problems. So people out there, you need to listen to teachers who are in the classroom every day. They're the boots on the ground. They're the ones on the front line. You need to listen to them because all the things they're talking about here are true. This professor praises foundational courses designed to teach students how to read critically and write a college-level paper. They are immensely valuable, she says, but they're typically taught by non-tenure track instructors who are under a lot of stress. Yeah, that's true, but students should be able to do it anyway. They're not prepared. Other professors share her frustration at the lack of collective attention. Several note that their campuses have reduced writing-intensive courses or writing requirements in their gen ed programs. I've seen this at some schools. That's true. Some say the administrators are more focused on keeping up enrollments than addressing these core academic challenges. As a result, they feel like they're fighting a rising tide. Yeah, administrators do not care at all about the classroom. Skill development, content knowledge, relationships between teachers and students, that kind of mentor relationship where you help a student actually grow. They care about keeping enrollment up and making money, and that's it. So yeah, the teachers are having these concerns and no one cares. The college has its head in the sand, insisting we have world-class students despite my colleagues and my concerns about dubious literacy skills. I don't know what to do. Students with a lack of functional literacy fall behind, farther and farther behind, and my load of hundreds of students is too great to give all of them individual attention. Yeah. Again, teachers aren't being listened to. They're the ones seeing these students who arrive in their classes in the fall, and they're like, yeah, you're not qualified to be here. Why are you here? And then they go to ask the administration, and they're like, oh, they seemed qualified. We let them in. And they're not, because they don't know anything about students. That's why. So professors are working on their own to find a way forward. Some have challenged students to push past obstacles. The one guy who was a former high school teacher actually increased the amount of readings in his English composition courses, which is good. His classes are tech-free. He gives quizzes on the reading, and he doesn't allow students to stay in class on days they have not completed the reading. He also talks to students about what it means to engage with an author's ideas. A key to his success, he believes, is building a rapport with students, engaging them in meaningful discussions, while also maintaining high standards so they know they earned the grade they got. Until now, he says, they haven't necessarily had high expectations to which they needed to rise. Yeah, these are all really good ideas, and this is what's called good teaching. Yeah, he's doing the right thing. When asked what makes a difference, students who have struggled with motivation often point to the same thing: having someone who is invested in their success. This is crazy. They're right, but this is crazy. This is their education. They should be invested in their own education. If young people today are sitting around waiting for someone to hold their hand and say, gosh, I'd be doing better if someone else invested in me in my education, it's yours. You're the one paying the bill. It's your career. It's your time. It's your brain. If you don't care about this, why should anyone else care? Doesn't make any sense. So you have to be responsible for you. And yeah, all of the stuff that's been talked about in this article, schools can do a lot better, but you're the student. It's your life. If you want it to be better, you've got to put in the work. You've got to be held accountable. You've got to meet the standards. You can't sit around and wait for, gosh, I wish some teacher would care about me more. Nope, you care about you. Do it. Be responsible. Stop waiting around for other people. Some teachers are coming up with ideas for trying to kind of teach basic study skills to catch them up faster. So there's a variety of ideas. Other professors focus on teaching foundational skills by scaffolding them into regular assignments or providing reading guides that help students learn to pull out key ideas. They quiz students on what they've read so they know it matters. A psychology professor uses group work and discussions to build a culture of reading. He has them read out loud in class. They talk about purpose and value, and he teaches them strategies for deciphering structure and challenging empirical articles. He says students will read if they know why they're doing it, and time is taken to help them begin to develop an approach that is effective. This all sounds nice, but this is all high school stuff. I mean, teachers should have been doing this back in like 7th grade, all the way through 12th grade, so that by the time they get to college, it's automatic. They don't need any of this extra help. A teacher can give a lecture or hand them a reading assignment and go, here's what I want you to do, go to it, and they can go home that night and knock it out with no problem. Having to hold kids' hands like this should have all been taken care of years before. The one kid who is the baseball player, sociology major, said teamwork would motivate him. In baseball, I have a coach. You need the coach to really care about you, to feel like you're enough for that team and to work together. But in the classroom setting, the professor is just up there teaching without knowing who the actual person is. Part of this is the ethos of the school. They don't create situations for you to have those direct connections. They put you in a class with 500 other kids, and you're right. You can't be in that type of situation. Now, you could have gone to a school. This kid goes to a large university. You could have gone to a smaller school where you'd be in a class with 15 kids and the professor would engage with you, but you didn't choose that. So now this is what you get. But also a lot of schools, they don't really support professors doing that. They have created all these staff positions where, if you have a question, you go to some staff person instead of to the professor. So when the kids complain, the professor isn't invested in me, that's because the school has basically encouraged the professor not to do that. They've said, we're going to create all these staff positions and administrator positions. If you have a question about your career or about your grades, go talk to them. Well, they don't know anything because they're not in the class with you. So the schools have really played a big role in the relationships between students and teachers. Section here about trimming down some of the reading material, and that's true. Too often, or at least in the past, professors would assign, you need to read all of Plato's Republic, or something. Read all of some other philosopher, or psychologist, or something that's kind of heavy, theoretical, difficult vocabulary. It's like, do you need to read all 300 pages of that book? Probably not. So picking and choosing the best things so that students can grasp it, or coming up with an equivalent that still gets the concepts across, but is a bit easier to read. It depends on what your point is, what your goal is for teaching those kids that content. If they need to read this because it's very important to hear from the original source, because we're kind of tracing the idea from where it began and through these stages. And so we need to go to the original sources to gain familiarity with this historical process, this process of evolution of ideas over time. If you're doing that, you need to assign the original. You need to do that. If all you're doing is trying to get the students to understand a concept, a literary theory or a psychological theory or an important idea in philosophy, they probably don't need to go back and read the most difficult person. They just need to read, someone who's more current and is explaining it in a much simpler way. If it's just about the topic, the concept, give them something easier. If it's about the historical evolution of ideas and understanding those authors and the time and place they wrote, then you might need the original. See, there's ways around this that you can make the reading easier and trimming it down a bit. It doesn't mean that's not dumbing down of standards. That's just adapting it to what's most useful. This other person is talking about the rise of audio and video and saying that that's, part of the shift in communication. Again, it's not the same as reading. Reading is way more valuable than that. And we need to prepare ourselves for that drastically different future. And I completely disagree with that. Just because that's happening doesn't mean we have to go along with it. He doubts it will be easy and this future may not be better, just different. If it means listening rather than reading, okay, that's where we're headed. That's what I try to be open-minded about. Humanity is going to take its course no matter what I try to do about it. So this final sentence that the article lands on, this is the opposite of education. When someone says, if it means getting rid of things that we know are really valuable, I'm okay with it. I just try to be open-minded. Humanity's going to do what it's going to do, so I'm not going to worry about it. Nothing I do matters. It's like, why in the world are you a teacher then? The whole point of being a teacher is you think there are certain things that really, really matter, especially things from the past that we need to pass on to our young people. And if you say, people are going to do whatever they do anyway, so who cares? Why would you want to be a teacher? That doesn't make any sense. So that's where the article lands. So a kind of a fairly thorough discussion about not only reading and language skills and writing skills that we're seeing in students, but how it connects to the broader problems on college campuses today. And I argue they're all connected. The reading problem is connected to the broader university problem. And the problems of the university, a lot of those go back to the types of students we admit and how prepared they have been before they get to our campus, and then how we prepare them while they're on our campus. So all these things are related. Reading, I just believe, is the most important skill. And so I think it plays a larger role in some of the larger problems that universities are dealing with. So there's an article from the Chronicle for you. Reading is still the most valuable skill there possibly is. It is the way that we transmit knowledge across time and space. And because it's stable, it's in print form, it's not as ephemeral as these digital tools that we've been using to create things. It just has staying power. And if you're going to relinquish that, you're going to have students who are going to be in a constant state of kind of flux because they don't have anything to ground themselves. They don't have our language and our ideas that have built Western civilization. If you're not going to make them read about it and then write about it, they're going to lose it. And that's what I fight for every day, every semester, every year, is to hold on to what has made our culture great. And at the base of what has made our culture great is literacy. Being able to write and read and think and share and discuss, debate. That's what makes us who we are. And if we're not able to do that, we're going to be in big trouble. So hopefully we turn that around, and universities need to take a stronger stance on what they can do to improve the students while they're at the university, but also to put more pressure on the grades below, and the grades in the schools below them, the K through 12, to make sure they're better prepared when they get to college. Until universities do that, I only see this getting worse. We've already lowered the standards so far. We're going to keep lowering them. I guarantee it. So I don't know when the bottom will be, but it's a little scary to watch it happen. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I know that was a little bit of a long one, but it was a longer article on a very important topic. So I appreciate you being here, and I will have another one for you soon. Thanks.